And welcome everybody to our weekly live stream. We are coming to you live from the Huckabee Theater in Hendersonville, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. Pam Case, executive producer for the Huckabee Show, joins me as she does each week. She's going to be reading questions that you send in. We'd love for you to send some questions in the chat. You can also send us one in the super chat mode for more visibility. We have moderators who are watching the chat for your questions, so please get them in. The earlier, the better, more likely we can get to yours. As always, one of the ways that you knew this was happening is because you're a subscriber. But if you're not and just happened upon us, subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell, and of course, leave a comment, a like, and share it with other people. We have a lot of ground to cover. I want to begin today on a personal note. I'm sure you are aware that rock singer extraordinaire Meat Loaf passed away at the age of 74 yesterday. We are all pretty bummed about it here because, to my knowledge, his last television performance for sure, and perhaps his last performance, was here in our theater back at the end of September. It was a magical evening. I first met Meat Loaf several years ago. He was a guest at my show when I was hosting it at Fox. For reasons that I fully cannot explain, he and I hit it off. We have maintained contact since then. And when I started doing this show, I said, gee, I really want you to come and do it. He's had health problems and has not been on stage in 6 years. So when he came to our theater in September, it was the first time in 6 years he had performed at all. And it was a magic performance. And I've linked to all three of his songs that he performed for us on my Twitter account. Of course, you can always go to Huckabee.tv and look it up there on our YouTube channel. But what an amazing artist. And so please understand, we are all heartbroken to learn of his death. It's just been a real sad kick in the backside because we came to love him. And a little thing for you to know, whatever the public persona that you may have of him, when the show is over, he went around to every person that he could find on our crew, not just obviously the musicians that he was blown away by. He was so taken by Trey Corley and the musicians that we have. But he went to every person backstage, to camera people, to folks that had a part of the show, and personally thanked them. It was just a class act, and he was such a fun guy to have because you never know what he's going to say or do, and I know we all will miss him. But he left an incredible legacy in the entertainment business because there was really no other like him. He wasn't like, well, he's kind of like, no, he's not like anybody. Everything he did was his own rock opera. It was pretty remarkable.
He was amazing, and I would say he was, and we've had a lot of guests here from all genres of music and such, but he was one of the most gracious, humble, funny people that's ever been on the stage. And so like you, I mean, and I told you, I wrote you earlier, I said, I've got tears in my eyes and we're going to remember him and honor him a little bit with the show tomorrow night. So I'm excited for us to do that.
Well, me too. Well, there's a lot of news that we are going to try to cover today, and we're going to start out as you might have expected. Joe Biden held a news conference, the first in 10 months, only the second of his presidency. And I think we all kind of figured out why he hadn't done more of these. It was a train wreck. Now, I'm not just saying that as a member of the loyal opposition party. People in his own inner circle, people who are on his side, and I'm talking about obviously CNN, MSNBC, and many of their commentators, said he did not help himself. I mean, folks like David Axelrod, who was the campaign chief for Barack Obama and worked with Biden throughout the White House term when Obama was in office. Van Jones at CNN, who's certainly more on the side of Joe Biden, but he's also a pretty honest guy. And you had people like that who were just saying that it just did not go well for Joe Biden. Some of it was the gaffes that he created, clearly creating an international storm over the remark that an incursion by Russia into the Ukraine wasn't that big a deal. And the staff of the White House have spent the last 2 days trying to correct that. But I think if you want to kind of see how he's reacting, this first clip we have, this is Joe Biden when he was asked, why are you waiting on Vladimir Putin to make the first move? Watch, more importantly than the question, listen carefully to his answer.
Why are you waiting on Putin to make the first move, sir?
Did you hear that? What a stupid question, he says, almost under his breath off camera, but it's not off camera. The mic's always hot, and he knows that. But it wasn't a stupid question. His response wasn't that brilliant because it was a fair question. Are you waiting on Putin to do something so you can react to, rather than taking action that might preclude Putin from doing something that starts a fire? This next one, this is Joe Biden. There were many times he would be asked a question and he would pause. The RNC put this little clip together. This is just a little piece of it, but they called it the Joe Biden silent film, as he gives silence and reflection instead of answers. Watch.
The idea that with the nature, not when the political coverage.
Okay, I admit that the music underneath gave it a little bit of comedic relief. But honestly, it was kind of painful to see that there were times that he had a hard time getting his thoughts together. It was like he took these long, pregnant pauses. Fact is, the reason the news conference took 2 hours is because so much of it was him silently drifting off into the ether, looking for an answer somewhere. It was troubling. All right, we're going to play this little bit here. This is Biden on Russia invading the Ukraine. Here we go.
So I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. My guess is he will move in. He has to do something.
Well, you may realize that this is what got him in trouble. I mean, the people of Ukraine went nuts. What do you mean, a minor incursion? The staff of the White House, Jen Psaki, tried to explain it away. Here's her response.
One, President Biden has repeatedly said the words of a president matter. So why isn't he more careful with his remarks?
Well, I think the president gave nearly 2 hours of a press conference last night. What we conveyed last night and this morning, was exactly what he's conveyed to President Putin. And I think what's important to the American public, and tell me if you agree or disagree, is what the president's positions are and what he means. And that's exactly what he provided directly this morning.
I've never seen someone talk in such a circle in my life. Basically, well, he talked for 2 hours. And he meant what he said what he meant, but we didn't understand what he meant, and he didn't understand what he said or meant, and therefore that's all we get. I mean, it was pretty bizarre. But that was the kind of press conference it was, and it created more questions than it provided answers, and that's not what a press conference is supposed to do. It's supposed to give the American people a sense of, oh, he's totally in command, he is absolutely in charge, he is utterly informed and on top of everything. You watch this press conference, as I did, and honestly, I'm thinking, this is frightening. When he's scripted, as he was the first 20 minutes when he was reading his speech, you know, he's reading words that have been put there in front of him. But once he gets into just answering questions, he truly appeared lost. Yeah. We getting some questions in?
We are, and Gov, of course, we are live, reminding everybody that this is the opportunity. We may not have answers, but we've got some thoughts.
There you go.
So we'll share those over the next little bit, and just make sure you like the video today. Make sure you subscribe to the channel.
Of course.
And gotta say, Gov, we've got folks from Texas, Florida, Canada, Louisiana, Winnipeg, Canada, just another one. Kentucky, Salt Lake City, Indiana, just to name a few.
Good.
So here we go. Let's talk about Russia. Why did he give Russia the pipeline and shut ours down?
It's a wonderful question. All of us have been scratching our heads for this. If you're paying more at the pump for your gasoline, and you are, if you're paying more to heat or I would say cool your home, but if you're cooling your home now, you're living somewhere way away from me. But if you're paying to heat your home and it's costing you more, all of this is because of the policies that are twofold. One, he wanted to shut down the American energy source, not just the pipeline, but he declared war day one in office on all fossil fuels for us. Then he turns around and says to Russia, you guys have your pipeline, which means they're supplying Europe. So we went from energy independence for the first time in about 70 years to now being energy dependent, with him going on camera begging OPEC to pump some more oil because we're running out. It is, I don't understand it. I mean, I can understand that he wants to appease the far left climate change people who want to get rid of everything that involves oil and gas. But let me tell you something. I really hope that people, particularly younger people, who say we don't want anything to do with fossil fuels or anything out of the ground. Fine, give up your iPhone, give up your synthetic garments, give up your cars, all of which disappear when we don't have plastics and we don't have synthetics that are often derived from oil. So I just want there to be a little consistency on that. By the way, if any of these topics are ones you have a comment on, you'd like to weigh in, we'd love to get your comments, not just your questions. Give us your comments as well.
Thank you for Vanessa Kammerer. She's the one that provided that first question there about Russia. We continue on that topic. Aaron Spear is asking, if Biden gets us into a conflict with Russia over Ukraine, would he be competent enough to handle it?
Oh, good question. Honestly, if you watch that news conference, I think you have the same response I do. No, because I'm not sure. First of all, what will we ask for in any type of resolution? Look, it's very clear that Vladimir Putin would love to restore the greatness of the old Soviet Union. He has lamented the day that it fell apart, and he wants to be back in that place where Russia dissolves back into the old Soviet Union and be a superpower. They are not a superpower. One of the things that disturbs me, and I just don't think people think through this, Russia is not our greatest threat. China is. Overwhelmingly, it's China. Russia is not that strong of an economy, and if we shut down their energy capacities, they really become a weak economy because it's all they got. And so we were in a much better place when we were supplying energy to Europe, and the Russians weren't the only game in town. We have reversed that. So we've given them power they shouldn't even be having. So no, I'm not confident that it would go well. I want to go to this clip because it's, I think, indicative of something that is happening to the Biden administration that is somewhat surprising. The mainstream media is beginning to find themselves unable to ignore where the country is, and particularly in the economy. This is a report from NBC on Biden's place.
1 year after taking office, according to our new NBC News poll, America's report card for President Biden is grim. His overall approval rating just 43%. More than half of Americans disapprove. 53% are unhappy with his handling of the pandemic. And on the economy, 6 in 10 disapprove of his performance. It follows the president touting his achievements on Wednesday.
Can you think of any other president who's done as much in 1 year?
Yeah, I could think of a lot of presidents who've done more in 1 year. Donald Trump did. My gosh, Jimmy Carter did. I thought that was one of the most absurd moments in the press conference when he said, can you think of any president who's done more in a year? Well, first of all, he's not there to ask the reporters questions, and they would be unprofessional if they said, yes, sir, I can give you several. So, you know, he leaves it out there as a rhetorical question as if he has answered his own question. That's totally not true. But I will tell you, he's done more in his first year than any other president in history to mess a country up. I've never seen a president in his first year make more fundamental mistakes that had a bigger impact on a country than President Biden has. And I go back to our border is a mess, and we now have people overrunning the border. Our Afghanistan policy failed, and we still have stranded Americans in Afghanistan. Inflation is at a 40-year high, which means that unless you have had a pay increase of probably close to 10%, you've actually lost ground in the last year. He may say, look, wages are up, but prices are up way more than wages. And if you just go through a litany of things, this has been a disastrous year. He said he was going to shut down COVID. We have more deaths this year than we did the year before. Remember when he said that all the deaths of COVID belonged to Donald Trump when Trump was president? How many news people have you heard? How many times has Biden said, okay, I just want y'all all to know, these deaths are on me? No, that hadn't happened. Again, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, leave us a comment, like the YouTube video, and be sure and share it with others. We hope that you will also send us your comments specifically about any of the topics that we're talking about.
Thank you. And a viewer named Linda Kay is out there encouraging folks, by the way, Governor, to hit that thumbs up button, that like button. So just want to give you a shout out, Linda. Thank you for that. And David White with a super chat, and you were mentioning Jimmy Carter. God bless Jimmy Carter with an answered prayer. Let there be a worse president than him.
David, that's a classic.
That's classic.
I love it.
What would it take to make Election Day a federal holiday to end all of this election nonsense? No excuse not to vote.
You know, even if we declared it a federal holiday, there would still be the people who want the ability to mail in their ballot after the election, to do ballot harvesting. Let's clearly understand what the Democrats want. And I'm really ticked off at the media for allowing the Democrats to frame this as voting rights. It is not voting rights. Let me give you a quick reason to tell you how stupid it is to say that. If people were being denied the right to vote, why was it that in 2020 more people voted than in the history of the country, and more minorities voted than in the history of the country? If you believe all of the ballots were on the up and up, then you have to believe that Joe Biden got 16 million more votes than any president in American history, any person in American history. You have to believe that Donald Trump got more votes than anyone had ever received to become president, and they still weren't enough to defeat Joe Biden. And you have to believe that every minority that wanted to vote, every elderly person, every person who wanted to vote got a chance to vote because the numbers were off the chart and through the roof. Now that hardly sounds like voter suppression. If so many people couldn't vote, how come they voted? What the Democrats are asking for is, number one, not to force photo ID to vote, which I find amazing. To go get a vaccination, photo ID. To walk into a government building, photo ID. Get on an airplane, cash a check, photo ID. Can you think of many things? You can't even go and buy a ticket to a ball game at the will call window without a photo ID. Can't check into a hotel without a photo ID. I check into hotels where people know who I am, they recognize me, they say, oh, hi, Mr. Huckabee, welcome back. Good to see you. Can I see your ID? And I want to say to them, you just did. It's my face. I don't do that. I happily hand them my ID because that's what I got to do to get into the hotel. My point is the Democrats want there to be no chain of assurance that a ballot is only in the hands of a legal voter. They want to make sure that you can mail a ballot to every person, period, on the voting list, even the dead people, even the people that have moved, the people who no longer live in that particular district. But a ballot gets sent to the address. You have no idea who received that mail, who opened it, who filled it out, and then you can just drop it off without any identification at some mailbox somewhere. And nobody knows who marked that ballot. And if a ballot comes in 2 weeks after the election, we have to hold everything up and count it then. Those are the things that I don't think people in this country support. But that's the so-called voting rights, which, by the way, they talk about Georgia. It is easier to vote in Georgia than it is in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. So how come he didn't go to Delaware and say that his home state was Jim Crow 2.0, and that people who disagreed with him in his own home state of Delaware were like George Wallace and Bull Connor? It's very disgusting, to say the least. So,
got a shout out to Wildflower 434 says, this is just a comment, the next governor of Arkansas is Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Just had to throw that out there.
I hope so, but then that's personal opinion.
This is always a good conversation, too. Cy Smith 23 says, join the Convention of States and take action and volunteer.
I totally agree with that, because we will never get Congress to act on things like the balanced budget amendment, term limits. It'll only happen when we, the people, through the states, take it upon ourselves. Article 5 of the Constitution gives us that authority and power, and folks, it's time that we use it. We mentioned a little bit before about the latest on COVID, and Kamala Harris has had a rough time, about as rough, if not rougher, than Joe Biden. She was asked about, what do you say to those people who are counting on you to end the pandemic? Listen to this rather interesting answer.
400,000 more Americans have died from COVID. The infection rate is higher than it was a year ago. People have to wait days to get a test. What do you say to Americans who are counting on you to end this pandemic?
Well, first of all, let me start with saying we are all 2 years into this frustrated. Now, none of us want to wear masks, but I think it's important to also recognize where we have together made progress.
Oh yeah, we've made such progress that more people are infected with COVID now than they were before we had a vaccine. More people have died. Schools are still closed down in a lot of places, and shelves are empty, and we can't get things here because so many people are unable to drive the trucks or go to work in the stores. So what she's talking about with the progress, I think a lot of us are missing out on that.
Yeah, you're right, Gov. Another super chat, Stephanie Ellis writes, will the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade?
It's a great question. We honestly don't know, but I think there's a real good possibility that it could happen by a 5-4 vote, with Roberts voting with the liberals, which he likes to do. Could even be a 6-3. Basically, it might happen as a result of the Mississippi law that is bubbling its way up to the court. But one thing I think people need to step back and understand, if Roe versus Wade were to be reversed, it does not mean that abortion is ended in America. All it means is that the abortion issue is back to the states, and each state decides how it will deal with it. Now, that's where it was until 1973, when the federal government reached out into the blue sky and decided to receive it unto themselves and make it a federal issue, which it had never been before. They had no constitutional basis to do it, but they did it anyway because it was the politically correct thing to do. Since 1973, we've been living under this illusion that you have a right to an abortion. Actually, what you had a right to was the right of privacy that the federal government protected. But if Roe v. Wade is repealed, some states, like my state in Arkansas, abortion is illegal, period. It's in our Constitution. It's one of the first political things I worked on back in the 1980s, was Amendment 65 to the Arkansas Constitution that said that the state of Arkansas would recognize birth from the moment of conception until natural death. So abortion would be over in a state like Arkansas. But there are other states, New York, California, that have very liberal abortion laws, and quite frankly, we could see an uptick in the number of abortions in places like that. So it would be state by state, and then the voters in each state would have to decide. So the people who say, oh, it ends reproductive rights, which is a ridiculous thing for abortionists to say, no, it doesn't. It just means that there may be some places that you won't be able to end the life of the baby that easily. In other places, it could mean there are actually more abortions. So what I hope happens is that someday the real issue gets decided. That's personhood. Because if we ever declare that at conception, that is a separate human life, biologically, that's what it is. If we ever get to that place, the 5th and the 14th Amendment now gives that person protection, because you cannot deprive a person of life or liberty without due process, and they have to be treated equally. That's really the ultimate answer that we should be hoping for.
Thanks, Gov, too. And if you're watching today, make sure you're liking the video. If you like what you see today, make sure you comment. If you have questions, there's still plenty of time to be part of the discussion today. Okay, just like, man, some great topics today. Cece writes, Gov, how do you suggest that we get Americans to be truly educated rather than indoctrinated? How do we enable more parents to homeschool if that's really the best means to start?
Well, I would say that if your child is in some school that is indoctrinating them, it may be necessary to find a way either to homeschool. A lot of parents maybe can't afford to put their child in a Christian school. Maybe there's not one available to you. I've heard of some communities where you have, let's say, a group of 4 or 5 families. They go in together, and those families hire a decent, good, godly teacher who teaches the children of that family. It's in essence home school, but it's collaborative and cooperative, where you may have families that say, boy, we don't have the capacity, we're not prepared, we're nervous about schooling the child ourselves. Quite frankly, you take those parents, pool the money together, and it's possible that you can hire a teacher to take care of several families, in essence start your own private academy. But be assured that the public schools of today, the government-run schools, are often a frightening place to be. But if your child is in one, go to the school board meetings, look and insist that you get to see the textbooks that your children are studying and read them. I mean, they're not that hard to read, but read their history books, read their social studies books, even their math books, because sometimes very doctrinaire questions are put into math equations. So I say, do not assume that everything is going well at your child's school. Insist that you get to see what the curriculum looks like.
Thank you for great comments, so many of them coming in today. And this question from Kathy Inman: for the first time in the past 2 years, my local news never mentioned COVID. It looks like they're trying to help Biden. February 2nd, they will no longer report COVID deaths. So what's up with that?
I think you're onto it. They're trying to help Biden. I mean, COVID is worse now than it was a year ago. And he inherited a vaccine. Now, he continues to say everybody's got to have it. Joe Biden would have it that you lose your job, you don't get to go to restaurants, you don't get to be on an airplane, you don't get to go to church if you don't have a vaccine. One of the things that is so anti-science is that the vaccine somehow is the magic elixir. I've said on many occasions, I took the vaccine because at my age and with some past history of pneumonia, it made sense for me, but I don't want you to be forced to take it for any reason. That's not something that your doctor has said is in your best interest. I am pro-vaccine, but I am not pro-mandate. I'm anti-mandate. Now, having said that, one of the things we've seen is that getting a vaccine and boosted does not mean you won't get COVID. You still might. Too many of my friends have just recently had COVID who are fully vaccinated and boosted. They still got it. Now, granted, their cases were very mild, and they didn't have hospitalization or life-threatening issues. But what I don't understand, the government has never given allowance for the people who have already had COVID and have natural antibodies. And all of the data that I have seen and the studies, and I've visited with people like Dr. Marty McCary of Johns Hopkins and others who really do know what they're talking about, and every single one of them say that the antibodies in your system from having had COVID are actually better than the vaccine can provide. But you never hear Joe Biden say, take the vaccine, unless you've had COVID and then you have natural antibodies. Why not? Why not? And I can't provide an answer for that, but I do think that there is an attempt now to soft pedal what COVID is doing, because there are people who just don't want to admit that the government has botched the response to it. And let me say one thing that I also believe has been very true. This is the first time in all of human history where we have isolated the healthy people during a pandemic. Historically, the sick people are isolated but not the healthy people, because they got to carry on the economy and carry on the workload. We shut down everybody except the people at Walmart.
Wow. Strong words. John writes, is it not normal what Putin is doing as he wants to protect Russians living in the Ukraine and to avoid having NATO in his backyard? Did the U.S. not promise Gorbachev that this would never happen?
Well, I'm not sure what we promised Gorbachev. I will be first to tell you I'm a little sympathetic with those who say, why are we worried as much? I don't want Putin to do this because I think it just helps him rebuild the Soviet Union. But I'm not sure I can tell you that it is the United States' job to protect Ukraine against Russia. It's not our neighborhood. It's not our border. Quite frankly, I'd rather see Joe Biden and our own government, Republican and Democrat, do more on our border than I had on Ukraine's border. If we're that concerned about the Russians invading the Ukraine, I wish we'd be a little more concerned about over 1 million people rushing across our Texas and Arizona and California border. And unless I saw some consistency, I'm going to have to throw the flag on that one and say, let's take care of our border first, and then maybe we can be a little more involved in the border at the Ukraine.
We've had so many folks today participate, and we're nearly almost finished. We've got a little bit left, so make sure you subscribe to our channel today, get those comments in there, and make sure you hit that bell so that time you'll be notified next time when we come live. Chuck Ray is asking, Gov, is there an international common law court of justice or not?
Well, there is an international court. It's headquartered in The Hague in the Netherlands, but it's pretty powerless and worthless and more of a, I would say, a show court, because it's very difficult. For example, if an American were brought up for charges, the question is, would this country extradite them to the international court? Probably not. So no, we don't have an effective one. We have one in name, but I don't think it has the power as would an American court in a criminal trial.
Going to go back to Russia one more time. Rose Childers asking, Russia announces deployment of over 140 warships, some to Black Sea after Biden's warning.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we can clearly see is the Russians do not fear Joe Biden. That's the one thing. And part of it, there was a great article that was published on my newsletter at MikeHuckabee.com. I didn't write it. It was written by Colonel Ken Allard. He is former dean of the Army War College at West Point, military analyst for NBC back in the 1990s and early 2000. And I asked him to write because he's dealt with this issue a lot. And he made a very fascinating comment. He quoted Joseph Stalin, who said that when you're attacking the enemy with your bayonet and you strike with the bayonet, if you feel mush, this is rather graphic, if you feel mush, keep going. If you feel steel, pull back. The point of that was that when you press forward and you don't get resistance, you're winning, keep going. If you meet strong resistance, then back off. Now, what Putin has clearly understood is when he's dealing with the Biden administration, he's getting mush. He's getting mush. And that was clearly seen in that very duplicitous answer that Joe Biden gave at the press conference, where on one hand he said, well, we don't want them to invade, but now a little incursion here and there, we probably wouldn't do much about that. And then he had to come back and after the Ukrainians said, what did you say? An incursion is an invasion. Oh, yeah, well, we don't want that either. That's mush. And that's what the Russians are sensing. That's why it is of concern, because the worst thing that can happen to America is that we lose our credibility and that nobody really take us seriously. But I'm more worried that what's happening is that China is watching this, and they're seeing the mush, and they're figuring, great time to go into Taiwan, great time to move into the rest of Asia. Great time to really first and foremost challenge the United States, which is a frightening thing that could happen. Yeah. Hey, we're going to have a great show this week, and I hope everybody will be joining us. James O'Keefe, the creator of Project Veritas, will be here. And it is going to be a must-see conversation with James O'Keefe. But I hope that you will be with us. We've got a lot that we'll be dealing with in the show you don't want to miss. But before you go, leave your questions as well as your comments. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. And as always, on behalf of Pam Case and all of our team here at the Huckabee Show in Hendersonville, Tennessee, thank you for joining us. And here's why you ought to watch the show tomorrow.
This week on Huckabee, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas.
It's called investigative journalism.
Digital illusionist Keelan Laser.
Wow, that was good.
And Grammy Award-winning singer Paul Overstreet perform. Watch Huckabee on Saturday at 8, 7 Central, and again on Sunday at 9, 8 Central, right here on TBN.